Hi, I'm Lorraine Jordan. I'm part of Grandma's Country Cottage School of Self-Reliance. A bunch of us grandmothers got together to teach some self-reliant principles through gardening and orchard and barn and some homemaking skills. Today we're going to be talking about the garden, and what I love about gardening is the principle of the law of the harvest. Whatever you plant and nourish, it must bring forth its like fruit. Today I'd like to talk a little bit about box gardens, because I've done traditional gardening for 50 years, but just the last 8 years or so I've been doing what we call box gardens. And my box gardens didn't cost me anything except for some soil I put it inside. My husband took some old boards that we found out by the barn and around the yard and just built these. So my box gardens are not fancy, they're very country looking, but they work. So some of the things I like about the box gardens are you can plant real early in the spring before you can till a regular garden. This year I planted in March, and we were eating out of the garden in the end of April. The cold weather vegetables like radishes and turnips and kale and collard greens and bok choy, the early cold vegetables. So you can see these box gardens, they're not fancy, but they really work and they produce a lot of food. So what I did this year, I also tried a new thing. I have planted my fall garden. So when I harvested some of my cabbages and the bigger things, then I just take a rake and rake up the soil, and I've replanted my fall garden. And it come up so quickly. I planted these on the 7th in August. Here is my radishes. My turnips are over there. I've planted broccoli and cauliflower and cabbages again, so I can extend my growing season and grow another crop. So that's going to be fun. So some of the principles of how to start a box garden like this is first, just build your frame. I happen to put it along the south border of my garden because I have a sprinkling system in here, because I used to have flowers here on this side of the garden. So that's why I built it here, because the sprinklers just water it for me. So that's very handy. But we just got some Miller's Garden compost and put in. And we found the first year that it didn't hold water very well because it's so porous. It just didn't have enough in the compost to hold the moisture. So the last few years we've added topsoil, and it's a mixture of topsoil and the garden compost. And I called Carl's Country Nursery out here in Elwood, and they sell by bulk a topsoil plus, which is a mixture of the things I've talked about, so it's all in one mix and you can buy it in bulk. So if you want to build and start your box gardens this fall, then early next spring you'll be ready to plant before you can even plant in your regular garden. Okay, the nice thing about the box garden is all you do is plant, water, and then you harvest. Carrots are easy to pull up out of it. Potatoes, onions, because you don't have heavy clay soil, they just pull up so easy. Now here's my onions. They're just about ready to pull and cure for winter storage. And so when these onions are done, all I do is rake it. You see how soft that soil is, and then plant the next crop. So it just makes it's very less time consuming, and you can plant over and over in the same season. So it makes it really, really nice. Now this year, or last year, I started these raised garden beds because as I get older, it was hard for me to get down even that low, the regular box gardens, to cut the runners on my strawberries, to pick my strawberries. So we bought these raised beds a little bit higher, and this, it makes it so easy. I can just sit on a chair, I can get in here, cut the runners, pick the strawberries without hurting my back. So that's a good feature for grandmas. Also, I put my carrots in them this year because that's another problem I had with growing carrots. It was so hard to bend over and thin them out, and they always had too thick of carrots. They didn't turn out very good, but this year I could sit here on my chair, take my scissors, and clip my carrots. So you can see I have much nicer, easier carrots to harvest because they won't be so darn thick as they've been in other years. And they haven't been watered, so I can't quite pull them. Well, there I did. So they're just nice and straight. They're still got to grow quite a bit, but see how easy that was to pull? In my regular garden, I'd have to use the shovel and dig them, so that's such an advantage. Also, I have planted some new strawberries here, just using the clippings off my old, cutting the runners off my old strawberries, and I've planted them here, so next year I'll have another thing of strawberries. So here's my regular garden, which I've done for 50 years. We still plant our corn, our tomatoes, cucumbers, and peppers because they don't do as well in my box gardens as out here in the regular heavier clay soil. So we put those out here. The box gardens I use for the smaller things, the onions, the lettuce, the cabbages, all this does really well. Also this year we put potatoes in them. We cannot grow potatoes in our regular garden because they get real scabby. There's a disease in the soil, I guess, and so we haven't grown potatoes for about 8 years. So this year we decided to put some in our box gardens. We have 1, 2, 3 beds of them, and they're doing beautifully. And I'm hoping they won't have the scab on them. So they'll be a treat for us to have grown our own potatoes, and they've been easy to take care of in these box gardens as well. Okay, now I want to teach you a few tips and tricks that I've learned as I've done these box gardens and been able to combat some of the pests that we deal with, especially me. I deal with a lot of birds because I have trees all around, so I have a lot of birds. And the first year we planted strawberries, oh my goodness, the birds found them before we did and took a great amount of my hard work strawberries. So I put a little wire, heavy wire, and made kind of a little hoop here, and then I just take this netting and put across, and the birds can't get at them. So I've taken it off some of them because they're not producing as much now, but during the heavy part when they're producing, this netting keeps the birds out of my strawberries. Also, over here you see I have netting. See those little white butterflies that fly around? I have a ton of them. And what they do is they go in and lay the eggs, and that's what makes the cabbage worms and broccoli worms, is these little white butterflies. Usually I use essential oils, and I've been able to keep the cabbage worms and broccoli worms out of my produce, but that takes a lot of time and effort. So this spring I got the idea, if I put this netting over, the butterflies can't get in and lay their eggs, and my cabbages has been beautiful. I harvested a 7.5 pound cabbage. It was like a big basketball and no worms in it because of my netting. So it just makes it really easy. It don't have all the spraying. Also, it keeps the grasshoppers out. So that's a wonderful idea. Now you might notice these hoops. The hoops serve a couple purposes. For now, it's holding the netting. one year, they call this tunnel gardening. One year, I planted my garden in February. I was eating out of it at the end of March, and it lasted till November. And this is how I did it. These small hoops, I pushed down in the ground a little lower, and I put a frost cloth over it. Then I have a larger hoop that comes up over. Then I put heavy plastic on that, and I tied it down with the bricks. And that's how I could plant so early, keep it away from the frost, and harvest so late, keeping it away from the frost. That was a lot of work. So now I'm going to design a big thing that I can just lift up and down without the work of moving the cloth and the plastic. It'll already be in one unit. And when I get that built, we'll film that. Over here you can see the larger tunnel, the larger ones. These go up over the smaller hoops. So the smaller hoops you put the frost cloth over, the larger hoops you put the plastic. And the plastic acts to keep the moisture in there because it acts sort of like a terrarium. As soon as we built this and put the smaller hoops with the frost cloth and the larger hoops with the plastic, within an hour you could see moisture dripping off the plastic into the plants because it acted like a giant terrarium. So it worked out really well, and that was really fun to do.